They planned my exit. I scheduled their audit. I didn't say that out loud. I just watched the elevator numbers climb, felt the stale Monday air in my lungs, and carried my notebook like a shield. The conference room was already cold when I walked in. Glass walls, blinds half closed, the city blurred into steel ribbons behind Paula's shoulder. She had a manila packet stacked beside a plastic cup of water. HR's Nora sat across from me, hands folded, face set to neutral. Paula started with the script everyone rehearses and no one believes. We're consolidating research. Her voice was smooth, like the carpet. This is a restructure. I nodded once. I've built systems for a living. I know when a process is being executed. You can't argue with a pipeline that's already running. You can only decide what you do with the output. Here's the part no one tells you. The quiet in those rooms isn't weakness. It's calculation. I listened to Nora read a paragraph about severance, another about benefits continuation, then the clause about company property, inventions, confidentiality, the usual legal hymn. Her keyboard clicked each time I said I understood. I let the words wash over me, then settle. Paula slid the packet across the table. I didn't touch it yet. The edge of the folder had a tiny bend, like someone had bumped it against a desk. That detail calmed me. Imperfect systems leak. Imperfect systems tell on themselves. Any questions? Nora asked. I took a breath and let it out slow. The HVAC hummed like a low drum under the carpet. No, I said. Not today. I signed the acknowledgement page. My pen didn't shake. The ink soaked in and looked final, which was fine. Endings are clean only when you write them yourself. They thanked me for my contributions to Ledger Nova, the platform my team and I had scaled from a messy proof of concept into revenue. They mentioned my title one last time, like a blessing or a eulogy. Principal Systems Architect. After today, I wouldn't be that here. The words slid past me like traffic. You want to know the mistake they made? They thought silence meant surrender. Paula tried the soft landing lines, outplacement support, glowing references, appreciation for my vision. I watched a plane cut across the smeared sky and thought about parallel streams of data, how they enter a system from different directions and still meet on schedule. Restructure on their side. Timetable on mine. Nora collected the signed page and recited the return of property list. I handed over my badge and laptop. I had wiped nothing, altered nothing, hidden nothing. I didn't need to. Every build artifact that belonged to North Beam was already documented, named, and referenced in our internal repos. That was my job and my habit. Order first, ego later. But there's a second habit I kept outside these walls. I built the hard parts twice, once to spec, once to learn. The second versions lived on my own time, on my own hardware, with my own money. Clean lines. Clear boundaries. After legal skipped a filing I had flagged 3 times, I stopped assuming stewardship and started creating receipts. Dana, Paula said. You're okay? I'm fine, I answered, and I was. Relief feels strange while the floor is shifting, but it felt like relief anyway. The decision had been made without me. Good. It freed up my calendar. I stood. Nora handed me a cardboard box, the kind that assumes you will take your framed photo and your pen cup and not much else. I placed my notebook inside. No photo. No pen cup. Just the notebook with the dates, the handoffs, the meeting notes with subject lines and action items. One page had a star next to a single sentence, follow up on IP Council response. I closed the cover. In the hallway, my team's desks looked paused, not empty. Monitors asleep. Coffee rings drying into pale circles. Leo's hoodie on the back of his chair like a shadow deciding whether to stay. I didn't stop. Goodbyes are for stories that end here. Mine didn't. In the lobby, the turnstiles flashed green when I walked out, one last compliance ping on a system that still recognized me. Chicago wind slapped my cheek as the revolving door spun. I loved that sting. It told me I was outside now. It told me the next move would be mine. A buzz in my pocket. A calendar reminder, quiet and private. 7 p.m., Clark Street. Dinner with a man who understood leverage better than Colin ever did. I looked up at the sky and laughed once low. Consolidation, I whispered to no one. Sure. Would you fight in that room, or save your breath for the part that matters? I walked toward the train, box under my arm, packet sealed, heartbeat steady. I didn't look back at the glass tower. Inside those floors, they believed they had closed a chapter. Outside on the sidewalk, I knew I had just opened a ledger. And the first entry went live at 7. At 7:04, Marcus walked in with rain diamonds clinging to his coat. Clark Street hummed outside, forks clicked inside, and the table between us held 2 menus we didn't open. He set his phone face down like a signal, privacy first. I slid the slim blue folder to him. Not dramatic, just deliberate. Inside were 3 things: my provisional filing receipt, the conversion confirmation to a non-provisional 2 weeks ago, and a timeline printed in clean columns. Dates, devices, commits. Where the work lived and where it didn't. Parallel ingestion engine, I said, calm as the water glass. Pi, the refined build. Not Northbeam's code. Not on company time. Not on company hardware. He didn't interrupt. Good CEOs know when silence does the heavy lifting. I told him what legal at Northbeam hadn't done. I'd flagged the gap 3 times. They deprioritized the filing twice. On the 3rd, they thanked me for my thoroughness and moved it to Q3 review. I moved it to my attorney. On my dime. On my schedule. I kept company assets clean, and I kept my conscience cleaner. Would you trust a rival with the one thing that could flip a boardroom? Marcus opened the folder and traced the dates with his eyes. I could hear him counting risk like a metronome. He asked me how separate meant separate. I walked him through the wall, my home lab invoice, the dedicated ISP line, the hashed notebook pages notarized monthly, the off-hours calendar entries sent only to myself. 2 repositories that never touched, one for Ledger Nova, the other for my research. Different languages and critical modules. Distinct architecture, lock-free fan-in, idempotent windows, a segment ledger with checksums that Ledger Nova never implemented. Ideas I tested at 1 a.m. when the city went quiet. He nodded once. And Northbeam gets everything that was built on their time, with their tools, under their contract, I said. I'll hand it all over neat. But this PIE is mine. And you can license it. He leaned back. The restaurant's low light made the rain on his shoulders look like static. He told me Apex had hit a ceiling integrating third-party ingestion layers. Everything buckled at scale. If my engine did what the spec suggested, it wasn't just a feature. It was a spine. We signed an NDA on his tablet, stylus scratching softly like a distant match. He texted his counsel a single line, need a 6 a.m. review, PAE license proposal attached. The proposal wasn't in his phone yet, it was in my head. Terms were simple: exclusive license, fair market royalty plus an innovation premium, explicit public credit naming me as inventor, and a trigger to appoint me to build out the platform the way it should have been built years ago. He asked what I wanted beyond the terms. I told him I wanted this clean. No theatrics. No mud. A lawful handoff of everything Northbeam owned, accompanied by a boundary document that would look boring to anyone who didn't understand leverage. He smiled at that. Boring can be a weapon. The server appeared. We ordered without thinking about it. I barely tasted the food. We walked through contingencies instead. If Northbeam tried to contest, my counsel would invite arbitration. If they claimed overlap, the commit diffs and design deltas would turn on lights in a dark room. If they threatened the team, I'd remind them of non-solicit boundaries and let time do the sorting. My phone buzzed once, Leo's name on the screen, then again, blocked number. I let both slide away. Tonight wasn't for panic, it was for precision. Marcus asked when I would tell them. I said, tomorrow morning. A full handover packet, versioned and indexed, with a cover note that drew a straight line. All company time outputs stay with Northbeam. Off-hours research is outside scope and already filed. He nodded again. No gloating, no adrenaline. Just 2 people balancing an equation. He studied me for a beat and said, if counsel clears the structure, we go exclusive. They will, I answered, not as a wish, but as a reading of the map I'd spent months drawing. He lifted his glass. I touched mine to it. The sound was small and final, like a door clicking shut in an empty hallway. Later, walking back into the wet night, I felt the city breathe around me. Steam rose from the grates, a bus sighed, a siren stretched thin and disappeared. In my bag, the copy of the filing letter felt heavier than paper. It felt like authorship distilled into weight. Back home, I opened my laptop, the personal one, and drafted 2 emails. The first, handover, Ledger Nova assets, with links to repos, build notes, and my clean exit checklist. The second, IP boundary and confirmation, written in neutral language, not an inch of heat, just facts and attachments and the sentence I'd practiced. This correspondence clarifies that the attached patent filings reflect work performed independently, outside employment, on personal equipment. I scheduled both for 9:05 a.m., 2 minutes after their daily leadership stand-up. Not petty, strategic. Messages land better when the room is still warm. On my nightstand, the notebook lay open to a page I'd starred months ago, follow up on IP Council response. I drew a small checkmark beside it. Then another line beneath. Prepare for noise. Thunder moved across the lake like furniture being dragged 2 floors above. I closed my eyes and timed my breathing to it. In the morning, I would give North Beam everything they owned and nothing they didn't. And somewhere between those 2 emails, the fuse would start to burn. At 9:05 a.m., both emails left my outbox like trains on parallel tracks. The first carried everything North Beam owned: build scripts, deployment notes, architecture diagrams, incident postmortems, and a neat index of service accounts with a recommendation to rotate keys within 24 hours. I attached a checksum list so any tampering would light up red. The second email was quieter and sharper, a boundary memo that separated company time deliverables from my off-hours research, with dates, devices, and receipts arranged like a clean ledger. How do you end a chapter without lighting a match? You let the paperwork do the talking. Read receipts started blooming. Nora's auto-reply hit first, polite and empty. Paula's came with a single line, appreciate the thoroughness, like a bow tied on a box she didn't pack. Legal's alias opened the boundary memo 3 times from 2 IPs. I pictured a conference call where someone said my name without inflection. Good. Keep it technical. Keep it dry. I zipped the same handover set to a secure link with a 96-hour expiration and pasted the hash into the cover note. Redundancy reassures people who live in rooms with no windows. Then I printed the inventory, slid it into a binder with labeled tabs, and called a courier. Chain of custody is a love language in our world. The front desk guard stamped my receipt hard enough to dent the page. That sound, thunk, felt like a door locking behind me. The boundary memo wasn't poetry, but I wrote it to be undeniable. Section 1. Timeline and calendars mapped against commit histories with a night and weekend pattern no one could miss. Section 2. My home lab invoices, serial numbers, and the notarized pages from my hashed notebook. Section 3. Design deltas, where PIE's lock-free fan-in, idempotent windows, and segment checksums diverged from Ledger Nova's legacy ingestion. Section 4. The emails to Northbeam Legal I'd flagged months back. Exhibit C. Thanks for your thoroughness. Moving to Q3 review. That line was the fuse, printed in 12-point calm. Would you trust silence, or would you trust numbered exhibits? At 9:17, Legal pinged me with a brisk paragraph asking me to confirm I had no intention of commercializing any invention related to ingestion architecture that could be reasonably construed as within the field of Ledger Nova. I exhaled. The sentence tried to stretch a blanket over half the sky. I forwarded it to my counsel with a single sentence, see boundary memo, prepared response attached, and replied to Northbeam in neutral terms. I would continue my career in compliance with my obligations. Any further questions should go through counsel. No heat. No speculation. Just doors aligned in a hallway. The courier texted, delivered, signed by D. Walsh, 9:29 a.m. I stapled the slip to my copy because order settles breath. On my personal laptop, I opened the binder's twins, PDF, and plain text, and scanned for a missed comma or a stray adjective. Nothing moved. Nothing needed to. Leo's name popped on my phone and hovered there. I didn't answer. I owed my team clarity, not gossip, and today clarity looked like documentation that made their lives simpler tomorrow. I drafted a message for later, the kind you send when you're careful, a thank you, a pointer to the handover index, and a reminder not to discuss anything beyond their role. Leaders lead by not dragging people into your storm. Apex Legal slid into my inbox at 9:41. The subject line was dry, review complete, license structure viable, and the body was drier, green light pending your confirmation that handover acknowledgement is logged. The words didn't sparkle, but my shoulders did drop a fraction. Viable means the bridge holds. I walked to the kitchen and stood by the window with a mug I didn't drink from. Chicago sounded busy and indifferent 2 stories below. Somewhere in that noise were traders, lawyers, recruiters, and 2 interns who'd misspell my name on their first day. None of them mattered. The only thing that mattered was that the documents told the same story coming and going. At 10:03, Northbeam Legal replied again, this time adding a clause about proprietary methodologies developed during employment, the kind of net that catches air. I smiled and copied my sentence back. All company time outputs remain with Northbeam. Extramural research reflected in the attached filings stands apart. I included the filing numbers again, not as a flex, but as a map legend. Numbers calm people who pretend they don't feel heat. The binder sat on my desk like a small, square truth. I opened the notebook to yesterday's star and drew another checkmark. Then I wrote a short line under it, prepare for interpretation games. They always arrive dressed as concern. By 10:26, Finance had opened the handover index twice. Ops opened the rotation recommendation and forwarded it to 3 managers. I pictured Nora reading the PTO payout schedule while her coffee cooled. Paula would forward my note to Colin with a soft preface. Dana was thorough, as always, because habits don't retire when you do. I kept my phone face down, which never silences anything important. It buzzed anyway. A calendar invite from Northbeam. Exit review, 15 minutes, slotted for noon with HR and legal. I accepted. A short room is better than a long rumor. Another invite followed from a different domain I already knew. Draft, public notice, hold for release. Apex PR had attached a template with 2 blank fields, license confirmation time, and my new title spelled correctly. Isn't it strange how the biggest turns arrive disguised as forms? I read the draft once and closed it. Not yet. The order was simple. Handover acknowledgement, then announcement. Break sequence and you look reckless. Keep sequence and you look inevitable. At 10:44, an email I'd been waiting for arrived from a name I didn't recognize, board counsel at Northbeam. The subject line was short, acknowledgement of receipt, and the body was shorter, we confirm receipt of the materials listed in your index. Please direct further communication through this address. I forwarded it to Apex Legal with the word they needed, logged. Then I turned my phone screen over and watched the seconds tick into the corner. The room was quiet enough to hear the radiator click. Somewhere downtown, a copywriter was polishing a headline. Somewhere uptown, a CTO would read it and forget to breathe. The release hadn't gone live. Not yet. My thumb hovered over the confirmation field, and I felt my pulse settle into something steady and final. When timing becomes leverage, do you move first or let gravity do it for you? At 11 a.m., I clicked confirm, and a door opened in public. The Apex release appeared first on the wire, then on 3 trade sites, then everywhere that turns whispers into headlines. In 2 clean paragraphs, they announced an exclusive license to my parallel ingestion engine, PE, and my appointment as Chief Innovation Officer. No fireworks. No adjectives. Just nouns that rearranged a market. My hands didn't shake. I watched the text load on my screen like a system reaching a stable state. Line 1 named the patent filings, Line 2 framed the scope, Line 3 stated what mattered. Apex would integrate PI into their stack, and I would lead the architecture. The closing sentence was a single hinge, credit to the inventor by name. I read that line twice, not for ego, but for accuracy. Names are contracts. Have you ever heard your name arrive in 100 voices at once? The sound wasn't loud, it was layered. Email chimes, client, then reporter, then a colleague I hadn't seen since a conference in Denver. A Slack message screenshot from a friend, Northbeam's private channel blinking red with question marks. A text from Leo that was mostly punctuation. A voicemail from a number I didn't recognize that started with congratulations and ended with call me back urgent. The city moved the way it always moves at noon, fast and hungry, but inside my apartment the air thinned to something precise. I opened the Apex page again, checked the timestamp, and took a photo of the screen for my records. Then I set the phone face down. The point wasn't to bathe in it. The point was to let the right people read. By 11:07, the first client forward reached my inbox. No greeting, just the release with a short line above it. Does this impact Ledger Nova continuity? I drafted a neutral reply pointing them to Apex Counsel for any licensing questions and avoided detail. I didn't mention dependencies. I didn't need to. Anyone who could read an architecture diagram knew ingestion isn't an accessory, it's a spine. Apex Legal pinged me, brief and surgical, live. Monitoring. PR sent a tidy schedule, social posts staggered, analyst calls queued, trade journalists offered a short Q&A. My part was to be available, not visible. You learn that early. Let the narrative sit in facts, not faces. At 11:13, I saw the first Northbeam reaction bleed into the public timeline. A guarded statement about ongoing commitment to innovation that said very little and tried to say everything. It avoided the word license. It avoided my name. It avoided the question everyone would ask by lunch. What does Ledger Nova run on if PIE now sits behind a different door? I didn't answer that for them. I poured water, took a slow sip, and watched my inbox turn into a heat map. Another client forwarded the release, this time with a note I could feel through the screen. We rely on ingestion SLAs, please advise. Ops people always write with the urgency of a server room alarm. I forwarded the message to Apex Counsel and added a single line, intro appreciated, I'll stay out of contract dialogue. Boundaries are easier to keep when you move them early. Microhook, then a deep breath, LinkedIn lit like a switchboard. Proud to share, thrilled to welcome, big news in data infrastructure. Each post pulled a different thread, my title, the license, the implications. The comments under Apex's announcement cut straight to it. Performance, throughput, lock-free concurrency, ground-level questions that told me who had actually read beyond the headline. I thought of my team, the 6 faces that had sat across from me while we whiteboarded a backlog into a roadmap. What would they feel reading this? Relief, maybe. Panic, probably. I pictured Leo standing in the kitchen with a paper cup, the office suddenly too quiet, the Slack DMs falling on him like rain. I wouldn't drag them into my story. The market would do that on its own. Compassion isn't a strategy, but it keeps you from stepping on people to make your point. At 11:21, the trade site with the loudest opinions published a quick analysis. It wasn't nuanced, but it was accurate enough. Ledger Nova's core differentiation depended on ingestion. Ingestion would now be governed by a license Apex controlled. They used the word dependency. They used exclusive twice. My name showed up in the second paragraph, spelled right, which for once felt like justice and not vanity. Beneath that article, a thread formed, investors asking about contingency plans, competitors sniffing for weakness, a consultant hinting at migration playbooks. None of it was new to me. I had sketched these branches months ago on a page labeled After. Seeing them rendered in public felt like watching a simulation you ran in private become street traffic. Apex's CTO called. I let it roll to voicemail and listened to the transcript. Calm, warm, efficient. They were spinning up a private call with key clients at 2. Would I join for the high-level overview? Yes. I texted in SendBridge and put the phone back down. A message from my attorney slipped in next. All clear. If contested, we hold. I didn't smile. I reached for the notebook instead and wrote 3 words, hold sequence. Breathe. The apartment settled around me like an instrument right after tuning. Radiator clicks. Street honks scattered by wind. A neighbor's laugh passing the door and disappearing. I thought of the glass conference room, clock set to the company's rhythm, and felt a clean distance form between then and now. Quiet can be a weapon. Today, quiet was proof of control. By 11:36, Northbeam site added a line under their product page, enhanced ingestion layer developed in-house, and I heard the hollow ring of language built to hold panic. Words don't create engines. Engines create words. The market knows the difference. I refreshed the Apex Press page again and ran a finger under the last sentence. Credit to the inventor. That line used to feel like a luxury. Now it felt like a floor that wouldn't give way. My phone buzzed on the table, skittering against the wood like it had a pulse of its own. I flipped it over expecting another client forward or a reporter angling for a quote. The sender line froze me for half a second. Colin Drake. Subject, can we talk? The subject line kept blinking. Can we talk? Colin never used question marks. He used declarations. Seeing that curve at the end of a sentence told me the floor had shifted under his shoes. I let the email sit for one full breath, then another. I replied with a single line, communication should run through counsel. I copied the board's legal address that had acknowledged my handover. No heat. No invitation. At 11:41, a screenshot landed from a friend in product, names blurred, timestamp sharp. Emergency session, executive only, it read, with a location that wasn't a room number, just war. Someone had renamed a conference room in a hurry. I didn't laugh. Panic is not funny when it breaks things people rely on. Have you ever felt a building tense from several blocks away? You can. It hums. Messages change from sentences into fragments. People forget greetings. Calendar invites arrive without descriptions. I watched the patterns, not the words. Northbeam's ops ping my rotation checklist a fifth time. Legal reread the boundary memo twice in 8 minutes. Finance forwarded my assets index to a private alias. When finance starts reading architecture, the market has entered the chat. Noon brought the exit review like a bell. I clicked the link and landed in a rectangle of faces. Nora's neutral calm. A junior lawyer trying to look senior. Paula's mouth set like a seam she didn't want to rip. The audio lagged a fraction of a second, just enough to make every sentence sound like it doubted itself. They thanked me for the completeness of my handover. They asked if there were any outstanding artifacts not yet disclosed. There weren't. I repeated my sentence, the one I'd polished until it tasted like water. All company time outputs remain with Northbeam. My extramural research is filed separately and stands apart. I named the filings. I named my counsel. I did not name Apex. Silence held for a beat. Then the junior lawyer tried a balloon with a wide net, methodologies developed during employment, and I popped it with the same pin, my memo, my notarized notebook, my invoices, my calendars. If we needed resolution, we would welcome arbitration. Polite, boring, aligned with gravity. Paula leaned forward like she could reach me through the glass. She asked if I'd consider a conversation with leadership to explore mutually agreeable paths. I heard the word paths and pictured a forest with a single marked road. I kept my voice smooth. Any leadership communication should route through counsel. My obligations would be honored. There was nothing else to say that wouldn't light something. We ended in 13 minutes. The call clicked off, and my apartment's quiet felt like a tuned instrument again. I stood, stretched, and the floorboard sighed, as if they'd been holding their breath too. At 12:14, Leo finally got through. His text wasn't words, it was weather, storm. Then a second message with a screenshot of his personal Gmail inbox. 6 messages stacked like dominoes, all from variations of leadership at Northbeam, time-stamped within 9 minutes. I zoomed the text. Each email carried a different angle, retention bonus, title bump, strategic importance, and one that made my teeth go cold, reminder of obligations, attached PDF bolding the non-solicit clause. I typed, then erased, then typed again. I told him I could not and would not advise him, that I respected his choices, that his counsel should review anything before he signed. I added a link to the handover index so nobody had to guess where anything lived. I reminded him that I hadn't solicited anyone and wouldn't. Boundaries are only real when you respect them under pressure. He replied with a 3-word echo, I know. Still, and left it hanging, the way people do when they're trying not to say, help me, and don't ask me to stay at the same time. Would you pick up the phone and play savior, or keep your hands clean and your conscience cleaner? A second wave hit. Two more of my engineers forwarded near-identical offers to their private addresses. One included an NDA with a clause that smelled like bleach, sweeping, blinding, designed to erase. I answered each the same way, no advice, only reminders about counsel and dignity. My throat tightened anyway. Leadership isn't dragging people, it's standing still so they can see where the ground actually is. The pattern of outreach bothered me. How did they get those personal emails so fast? Maybe HR kept them for emergencies. Maybe someone exported a list. Maybe panic does what policy forbids. I didn't speculate in writing. I opened my notebook and recorded the timestamps. Facts first, feelings later. Colin tried again. A short message, then a longer one. The second arrived with a tone people use when a deal walks out the door. We can find a productive arrangement if we speak directly. I watched the cursor blink in the reply field and pictured a room with a long table, 3 folders, and a glass of water sweating on the wood. I closed the window. Direct as a road without guardrails. Apex pinged me at 12:31 with the bridge for the 2 p.m. client call and a list of who would be on: CTO, counsel, 2 senior engineers, plus me for the technical overview. Beneath that, a one-line update from legal that felt like a dry smile. We anticipate inbound. Gravity doing its work. My phone buzzed again, unknown number, then no number, then no caller ID. I let voicemail catch them all. Turnstiles were spinning downtown. I kept my pace. At 12:48, another screenshot from inside North Beam surfaced, this time a Slack message from Colin to the ExecOps Legal channel. No preamble, just a line. Find out what exactly PIE covers and where our exposure is. The words "our exposure" hung in the air like a smell. Exposure is what you say when something is already shining on the thing you hoped would stay in shadow. I took a slow breath and set a timer for 10 minutes. No decisions until the timer clicked. I washed a dish. I watered the plant I always forget to water. I watched a cloud slide over the sun and bring the room down one shade, then pull it back up again. When the timer chimed, I sat and drafted a short, neutral reply to Colin's first email. Per my earlier note, please coordinate through counsel. Then I stopped. No extra sentence. No invitation. The discipline of fewer words. Leo texted once more, a whisper wrapped in punctuation. They asked if I knew about your deal. I said, I know you keep records. I smiled because he remembered the only part that matters. By 1:20, my inbox had turned into a split screen, left side North Beam heat, right side Apex structure. One side tried to pull me back into a room to renegotiate the past. The other built a bridge toward a future that was already speaking in timestamps and test plans. The noise rose, then settled, then rose again. Under it, I could hear my own pulse steadying into something colder and kinder than anger, resolve. Not to crush anyone. Not to gloat. To hold the line I'd drawn with receipts, signatures, and the patience to let other people discover what I already knew. I put on my coat. The afternoon had brightened into that winter glare that makes everything look more honest than it is. The train would be crowded. The Apex conference room would smell like new carpet and coffee. The whiteboard would be clean. I would draw the same shapes I'd drawn 100 times, only this time on a wall that didn't bend. At 1:42, a final email from North Beam appeared before I closed my laptop. It came from a new address, CEO at North Beam. The subject was not a question this time. Call me now. The body was one line, we can fix this. I let the word sit. Then I powered down. Some repairs aren't repairs. They're edits that pretend history is clay. The elevator doors opened in my building with a soft bell. I stepped in, pressed the lobby button, and watched my floor number slide away. Somewhere under my feet, executives were still in that room, renaming things and calling it strategy. Somewhere ahead, an engineer was opening a fresh repo. My phone vibrated once more in my pocket, a calendar alert for 2 p.m. client bridge. I felt the corner of my mouth lift. Not a smile. Something steadier. When the doors parted and the cold hit my face, I knew exactly where the next move would happen and who would be in the room to see what the engine could do. The Apex conference room smelled like new carpet and coffee, just as I'd pictured. Two engineers rolled in a cart of loaner hardware fans whirring, LEDs blinking like tiny steady heartbeats. The CTO nodded once, pointed to the whiteboard, and let me set the outline. We weren't here for speeches. We were here for numbers that didn't flinch. I plugged in the drive and loaded PIE like a musician lifting a lid. The harness spun up, logs began to chatter, and the room's background noise thinned until I could hear my own breath. We ran their current ingestion first, baseline in gray. Then PIE, same dataset, same constraints, no excuses. Would you trust numbers over noise? By 3:10, the first run finished. The graph jumped. Throughput up 49% at steady state. CPU dropped, back pressure smoothed, and P99 latencies stopped throwing tantrums. Nobody clapped. Good rooms don't. Good rooms lean in and watch the second run confirm what the first one dared to say. I walked through the why, slow and simple, lock-free fan-ins so threads don't argue, idempotent windows so retries don't poison truth, segment checksums that act like seatbelts when packets get jumpy. The details didn't sparkle, they held. You could feel the team's shoulders drop a fraction, the way pilots breathe when turbulence quits pretending to be permanent. Again, the CTO said, calm. We did it again. Same lift. Same smooth curve. I watched the gray and blue lines separate like a before and after photo you don't need a caption for. Legal slipped in midway, quiet shoes, quiet faces, templated language ready. We shifted to the other whiteboard. Standard license for current users, I said. Clean on-ramps, no traps. Above market rate for exclusive scope. Explicit inventor credit in public materials, non-negotiable. Sublicensing prohibited without written consent. Audit rights annual, cure period sane, termination clauses that behave like doors, not guillotines. They sketched while I spoke. The pen squeaked when someone underlined credit to inventor. I didn't smile. I just nodded once, like that sentence was a beam in a house we weren't going to risk. What do you do when the graph jumps and the room goes silent? You fix the price of silence. We drafted an FAQ for client continuity, a page of sentences designed to slow heartbeats, existing SLAs honored, migration support available, roadmap steady. No shade, no chest thumping. Stable is persuasive, I said. The PR lead wrote it at the top of her notebook and underlined it twice. A junior engineer asked the question that mattered to builders, not bankers. What breaks? I appreciated him for it. I told him 2 edges would bite if ignored, idempotency assumptions and dead letter handling. We wrote a checklist. He snapped a photo like it was a map out of a storm. At 4:12, the third run finished with the same lift, and the team finally allowed a quiet exhale. The CTO checked his watch and said the line that moves markets more than any slogan, this ships. Legal reappeared with a draft packet labeled Standard Terms V0. It read like good steel, no drama, no rust points. We added one more clause, public changelog entries crediting PIE explicitly on integration releases. Names are contracts, credits are memories receipts. Anything else? Counsel asked. One more, I said. No press that leans on me as a character. Keep the story in the spec. She nodded. The safest victories wear plain clothes. We moved back to the graph, and I saw the room differently, less awe, more planning. Tasks split themselves. Test matrix, staging rollout, client call bridges, support scripts. Order has a sound. It clicked into place. Leo texted me a single word, watching, and then a second line that read like a held breath. Proud of the lines you drew. I didn't answer. Pride is private when the next step requires both hands. The CTO handed me a marker. Your call on the sequence, he said. I wrote 4 boxes and drew clean arrows between them. Validate, announce, onboard, stabilize. No shortcuts. No victory laps. Gravity does half the work if you let it. Outside the glass, Austin's light went gold on the buildings, even though I was still in Chicago. Different cities, same physics. Systems don't care about skylines. They care about timing, load, and who owns the keys. The bridge for the 2:00 client call had turned into a 5:00 overflow. We were ready. We had the graph, the checklist, the template, and a room that believed the data more than it believed adrenaline. My phone buzzed on the table, vibrating toward the edge like it wanted to leave. Unknown number. Then another buzz, same cadence, same insistence. I let it run out and focused on the board until the room quieted again. When I finally flipped the screen, the name that filled it wasn't unknown at all. Nora Kim. HR, North Beam. Would you pick up now or let the terms speak for you? The phone started vibrating like a trapped bee. Client forwards, analyst pings, calendar holds. Apex routed the first wave into a single bridge. I kept my voice level and practical. I walked through what mattered to operations people at noon on a weekday: continuity, cutover, rollback, support. I didn't sell. I didn't spin. I drew boxes and arrows on a shared whiteboard and let PV's test numbers wear the badge. Would you believe a headline or a checklist that makes pagers quieter? Procurement voices arrived next. They used words like assurance and expedite. Counsel answered with measured sentences and dates that sounded like floor joists. My part stayed technical and boring by design. Idempotency assumptions, dead letter policy, observability hooks. Questions slowed. Heartbeats did too. A message slid across my screen from a name I knew only from invoices: Fort Briar Capital, one of North Beam's louder customers. Their CTO wrote 4 lines that said everything without posture. Saw the release, need certainty, can we align on a path? I replied with 2 sentences and a bridge to Apex's counsel. No extra light. No heat. Nora called. I let it ring twice, then answered. Her tone was gentle, like she was entering a room with a sleeping child. She said leadership wanted to explore options, that my exit terms could be revisited, that there were creative paths we could walk together. Hallway words. Cushion words. She was doing her job, and I respected the craft. I kept mine. I told her any communication should run through counsel. I thanked her for the professionalism yesterday. I noted the acknowledgement from board counsel and repeated the sentence I'd repeated all day: all company time outputs remain with North Beam. My extramural research is filed separately and stands apart. She exhaled into the receiver, a soft wind through a narrow gap. We ended politely. No promises. No traps. The bridge filled again, 3 clients this time, 2 with engineers who asked real questions. We ran through failure modes and back pressure behavior. I described the way PI treated retries as math, not drama. Someone chuckled, relief more than humor, and I heard keystrokes like rain in the background as they updated a runbook live. Between calls, the room thinned to murmurs and the click of counsel's pens. PR slid in with a draft line for inbound media. No comment beyond our release. Continuity discussions are underway with existing market participants. Clean words. Straight spine. A message from Leo arrived like a quiet tap on a window. 2 clients asked me if we'd stay steady. I pointed them to your handover index. I typed only, thank you. Anything more would make a weight he didn't need to carry heavier. After 4, a private channel lit up with an LOI from a client I'd once flown red-eye to save. Their legal sent a template-stamped contingency. Apex Counsel's reply was a scalpel, scope, term, audit, credit. The document traded hands without me needing to touch it. That, more than the graphs, felt like proof. Systems were doing what we designed them to do. Another call, then 2. A reseller asked if PI could be offered white label. I explained why engines don't wear costumes well. We talked about roadmaps and nouns, not adjectives. The reseller thanked me for being calm. Calm isn't an emotion, it's a tool. Nora texted, leadership would still like to connect today briefly. I replied with 1 line and 2 addresses: board counsel, my counsel, and put the phone face down. The wood buzzed under my palm for a second, then stopped like a thought that decided not to finish itself. Apex's CTO handed me a printed schedule for morning calls, staggered like stair steps. We'll sleep some, he said, half smiling. The printer clacked in the corner, spitting contracts into a tray in even piles. Outside, Chicago's sky had turned the color of wet slate. Inside, the room smelled like ink and coffee and a plan that had survived contact with reality. A push alert flared on my screen, market chatter bundling my name with 2 tickers. I didn't open it. Not yet. Numbers would have their say soon enough, and I didn't need their voice to steer mine. The last bridge of the day began with a client whispering like her walls had ears. I spoke softly back. We covered maintenance windows and the one scary edge case nobody names in public. She thanked me twice, then once more, like saying it made the ground firmer. When the call ended, the room finally went quiet. Not empty quiet. Council packed their folders. Engineers stacked the loaner gear. The CTO erased the whiteboard until only a faint ghost of arrows remained. My phone buzzed across the table and stopped at my elbow. Nora again. Board wants a brief tonight, her text read. New guidance coming. Can we talk 5 minutes off record? I looked at the door, then at the stack of signed acknowledgement slips in my bag. Off record is a hallway with no lights. I typed 3 words through council, please, and locked the screen. In the reflection on the dark glass, I could see my face and, behind it, the city lights blinking like a slow, patient metronome. Somewhere between those blinks, something larger was shifting. And just before I reached for my coat, the alert I'd ignored earlier flashed again, this time with a headline that made the room's silence lean forward. The alert didn't whisper. It rang like cutlery on glass. North Beam -9% week to date. Under it, a second line glowed with quiet confidence, Apex +14%. The numbers weren't loud. They didn't need to be. They put weight on the far end of a seesaw and let gravity explain itself. Would you place a call now or let the market do your speaking? I set the phone down and watched the room sharpen. Council stacked fresh copies of the term sheet. The CTO erased the last ghost of marker from the whiteboard and drew a single box labeled license. Inside it, 3 short lines, exclusive scope, credit to inventor, above market rate. No adverbs. No sugar. We read the document out loud like pilots reading checklists. Scope, ingestion engine and derivatives. Royalty, fair market plus innovation premium. Credit, inventor named in public materials, release notes, and conference appearances. Audit, annual, with cure. Sublicense, prohibited without written consent. Continuity, transition assistance, fees escalate on delay. Each line clicked into place with the sound of a latch finding its home. Apex's GC added a sentence I loved for its lack of poetry. Non-negotiable elements are shaded. The shaded parts held my authorship like a beam. We pushed the final PDF to board council at North Beam with a single-line cover, standard terms for continuity. No victory lap. No dig. The next alert arrived wrapped in analyst language, dependency risk, continuity uncertainty, leadership credibility. A graph trailed across the screen like a vital sign turning jagged. I didn't forward it. North Beam already knew how to read their own pulse. Clients kept calling. One sent a procurement template with a checkbox labeled Assurance. We checked the box with dates, not adjectives. Another asked if PIE could be temporarily opened to them, like a door we'd prop with a shoe. Council answered, not without license. Doors are either open or they're not. By noon, Fort Breyer's LOI had signatures from both sides. The contract ate my name only once in the credit clause, and that was enough. A system that remembers your name is a system that can't pretend you never built it. Nora texted a soft question, open to a quick conversation. Leadership seeks a constructive path. I typed the same 3 words I'd been typing all day, through council, please, and sent it. Clean lines don't fray when the tone is polite. The market did what markets do when they smell smoke, called the fire department, and then watched the windows. One trade site ran a midday piece with a single accurate sentence. Ledger Nova's core ingestion now requires a license Apex controls. The comments split the usual way, half tech, half theater, but the smart ones asked about service levels and audit rights. We had answers printed and ready. We briefed Apex's PR one more time. No personas plot. Facts only. They nodded and slid a calm paragraph to the wire. Continuity teams engaged. License terms standard. Integration underway. Nothing for trolls to chew. At 1:40, Board Council replied with the only sentence that mattered today. We acknowledge receipt. The board will review this evening. No pushback. No adjectives. A straight line into a closed room. I stepped away from the table and looked out the window. Chicago lay flat and bright, February sun making every edge honest. A bus sighed at the light. Someone laughed under a hat. I thought of the glass conference room I'd left, the manila packet, the polite script. None of it could compete with a candlestick chart and a clause that names the inventor. Apex Finance slipped in with a spreadsheet of scenarios: license at standard rate, license at premium, delay penalties. I read the columns like I read logs. The numbers did not gloat, they measured discipline. A premium isn't punishment. It's payment for the year someone tells a team to move it to Q3, and you carry the weight yourself. We tuned the client FAQ again, trimming every word that looked nervous. Existing SLAs honored. Migration support available. Release cadence unchanged. Credit posted on integration notes. Stability is a voice that makes rooms sit down. Another analyst note pinged. Target cut for North Beam. Watch, move to, under review. I imagined the boardroom air thinning as binders opened and chairs rolled closer. I imagined Colin talking in paragraphs, while the graph on the wall spoke in points. Data is impolite that way. It answers questions nobody finished asking. At 3:05, my attorney sent a short line. If they contest scope, we welcome arbitration. The record is kind. I underlined kind. The record wasn't vengeful. It was patient. A ledger that doesn't shout. Evening stretched long and blue across the city. The day's bridges were done. Council gathered their pens. Engineers shut down the loaners. I filled a glass and watched the condensation trace my thumbprint down the side. A final push alert lit the phone like a match in a dark room. North Beam schedules emergency board session. Leadership review on agenda, and below it, a familiar cadence. Apex closes near highs. 2 rooms. 2 decisions. Same clock. We sent one more copy of the term sheet, this time with a red line tracked against their old template: no poison pills, no traps, just the shaded non-negotiables holding steady like stones in a stream. The cover note stayed gentle, available to discuss after board review. I powered the screen off and listened. Radiator clicks. Street brakes. A neighbor's muffled music. Somewhere across town, a table of directors was squinting at a sentence that refused to move. Credit to the inventor. Somewhere else, a CEO was practicing a speech into a reflection that didn't agree with him. The email arrived at 7:58 p.m., thin as a blade and just as sharp. Please hold availability tomorrow morning. Board anticipates constructive dialogue pending internal decisions. I read it once. Then again. What happens when a company realizes the cheapest option is telling the truth? I set the phone face down. In the dark glass, my reflection held still while the city kept blinking. And just as the first snow started to tap the window, a new name appeared in my inbox, one I hadn't seen on North Beam letterhead before. At dawn, the subject line read like a verdict: governance update. Snow dusted the sill. The city breathed in steam and quiet. I opened the email and felt the floor tilt, not under me, under them. The board had initiated leadership changes. Colin was out. Paula was out. An interim CEO named Evan Shore would assume responsibilities immediately and pursue a constructive resolution. When power shifts, do you lean in or let it pass like a tide? I didn't lean. I studied. I copied the notice into my notebook, wrote the time, and underlined the sentence that mattered: constructive resolution. Constructive means the market already wrote the first draft and the board decided to stop arguing with it. My phone hummed with a second rhythm, private addresses lighting up like runway lamps. Leo first. His message was short, almost shy. He'd accepted Apex's offer. No exclamation points. Just relief you can hear without sound. A minute later, May replied yes. Then Armin. Then Lila. Then Ben. 6 in all by 8:12 a.m. They didn't ask me for advice. They didn't look for absolution. They'd read the handover, read the release, read the room. They wanted to build, not defend. I answered each with the same 4 lines: gratitude, counsel first, dignity always, and a reminder that I hadn't solicited anyone. Boundaries don't get stronger by pretending they don't hurt. I sat with the ache anyway. These were the people who built weekends into bridges because I asked nicely and brought soup. Leadership isn't glory. It's weight you carry so others don't have to. By 9, Apex HR had cleared their backgrounds and booked flights. The CTO placed their names on a whiteboard under a single word: stabilize. No fanfare. Just roles, start dates, and a quiet understanding that loyalty grows best where authorship is named. Board counsel emailed at 9:27 with the tone of a metronome. Evan requested a meeting to negotiate terms that ensure continuity for customers and preserve mutual interests. They proposed noon, neutral ground, 3 principles each, counsel present. I read it twice, then a third time for the spaces between words. Mutual interests works only if memory is allowed in the room. I replied with my list before anyone could ask. Exclusive scope affirmed, above market rate for the exclusivity they had forced into the market, explicit public credit to the inventor in product pages, release notes, and conference decks, acknowledgments of the filings by number, and no gag provisions disguised as professional courtesies. I ended with the most boring sentence I know, the one that wins more fights than any speech. We welcome arbitration if necessary. Evan answered quickly. The email was brief and human. He acknowledged the record, admitted the gap, and asked for room to fix what he didn't break. I respected that. A good interim doesn't rewrite yesterday. He gets tomorrow to boot cleanly. 10 minutes later, another document slid across, retention plan, revised, aimed at the engineers I'd once shepherded through outages and birthdays. Salary bumps, vesting accelerations, promises of internal credit. Pretty words that don't compile if authorship lives elsewhere. I didn't touch it. Not my field. I forwarded it to counsel and let gravity grade it. The market kept narrating. 2 analysts moved North Beam from under review to requires clarity. 4 Breyer confirmed they'd signed the LOI. A healthcare client asked for documentation we can show our auditors, so we sent the FAQ that turned fear into steps: validate, announce, onboard, stabilize. The printer at Apex chirped like a small, satisfied bird as contracts slid into the tray. At 11:40, Leo called from a street corner, traffic folding around his words. He said the last week felt like holding his breath underwater, and this morning felt like coming up for air. He didn't ask for advice. He promised he'd treat the bridge with respect, no salt, no stories. He thanked me for the handover index because it made his exit conversations brief and clean. I told him the only thing that mattered: build well, sleep more, and don't let anyone convince you your work was an accident. Snow brightened. The room felt lighter, as if the radiator had learned to breathe. I packed the binder again, boundary memo on top, term sheet beneath, copies of the filings, and the printout of Apex's release with my name under a sentence that finally fit. I slid a blue pen into the spine. Not for drama. For signatures that mean what they say. Noon settled like a second hand finding its tick. We met in a glass room that wasn't anyone's home field, a neutral office with art that tried not to offend. Evan arrived with board counsel and a calm that didn't overpromise. He shook hands without performing remorse. He said he'd read everything. He said he understood the non-negotiables. He didn't say mistakes were made. He listed them. We started where all grown conversations start: numbers, scope, credit. Counsel read each clause out loud like a spell: exclusive license terms, royalty bans, audit rights, continuity obligations, credit lines. Evan paused on credit to inventor and asked for practicalities, placement, permanence, and what happens if marketing tries to tuck my name under team. I told him the truth. Credit that hides is not credit, it's camouflage. He nodded once and wrote non-shrinkable next to the clause like an engineer labeling a wire. For an hour we moved sentence by sentence across a bridge made of paper. No raised voices. No theater. When we reached the escalators, delay penalties keyed to service windows, he didn't flinch. He said, "We won't need those if we move." I said, "Then we're aligned." We let the air sit between us like proof. Halfway through, my phone buzzed in my bag. Another acceptance. Then another. 6, then 7, then 8? No. I stopped counting. It would turn pride into scorekeeping. I kept my face neutral and my notes clean. Across the table, Evan's counsel adjusted his glasses and underlined above market like it had earned its place. We broke for water. Evan looked out at the snow and said he wanted his engineers to sleep again. He said he couldn't change the past, but he could stop pretending it hadn't happened. He asked, not demanded, if we could draft a line that acknowledged my authorship without turning his people into a headline. I gave him the sentence I'd been carrying for months. LedgerNova's ingestion integrates the parallel ingestion engine under exclusive license. Credit to inventor Dana Mercer. He read it once and said, that will hold. We returned to the table. Red lines shrank. Shaded clauses stayed shaded. When we reached the final page, counsel slid the signature blocks forward and left one field blank, the date. Evan wanted a brief board huddle before ink. I wanted the same. Alignment isn't agreement until it survives the room. We stood. His handshake was steady, not relieved. Thank you for keeping this clean, he said, more to the air than to me. Clean isn't kindness, it's strategy with a conscience. I told him I'd hold the window till morning. He nodded. Counsel gathered their pens. Back at my desk, the city glowed silver and honest. I opened the notebook and wrote 3 words across a clean page: credit, license, sleep. My pulse finally matched the radiator's rhythm. In the inbox, 2 messages waited, one from Apex PR with a draft sentence that echoed ours, and one from board counsel with a subject that didn't bother with flourish. Decision tonight. Signatures at 9 a.m. The room went still in that way rooms do before something changes shape. I set the blue pen on the binder, a line to the spine, and let the last hour settle. Outside, the snow kept tapping the glass like someone rehearsing a knock. Tomorrow, the door opens or it doesn't. At 9 a.m., the pens hovered. The room held its breath. Board counsel read the final line again, slow as a steady drum. Exclusive license to the parallel ingestion engine, above market rate, audit rights, continuity obligations, credit to inventor Dana Mercer in product pages, release notes, and public materials. Evan nodded once. Ink met paper. The sound was small and absolute, like a bolt sliding home. My turn. I signed with the blue pen I'd been saving for this. No flourish. Just my name, spelled the way it's supposed to: live, visible, unarguable, ordinary in the best way. Would you chase applause or choose a sentence that can't be moved? Within an hour, Northbeam's product page added a single, unglamorous line beneath LedgerNova's ingestion integrates the parallel ingestion engine under exclusive license. Credit to inventor Dana Mercer. It wasn't big type. It didn't need to be. It was the quiet correction a market understands. Release notes followed that afternoon with the same credit, anchored like a rivet you can't pry without breaking the wing. Clients settled. Contracts clicked. The FAQ did its work like a sedative for anxious servers. My team unpacked laptops in a new room, badges still stiff on new lanyards. Leo sent a photo of the staging board, columns clean, cards moving right. I didn't reply with exclamation points. I wrote, good. Keep it boring. Boring means reliable. Reliable is compassion dressed as engineering. For months later, I stood under lights that made the stage look warmer than it was. The national conference smelled like coffee and carpet glue. I told a room full of builders the truth I wish someone had told me earlier. Stewardship is a habit, not a ceremony. Authorship isn't a trophy, it's accountability that doesn't jump ship when calendars roll over. I didn't mention names. I mentioned dates. I mentioned receipts. I let the slide with one sentence breathe. Name the work. Name the worker. Then build. Backstage, a young engineer with a voice like a held note thanked me without explaining why. I knew anyway. So much of this job is giving people permission to keep their own signatures. Winter aged into another winter, and the numbers told their own parable. 13 months after the ink dried, Apex stepped past Northbeam in valuation on a Wednesday that looked like any other Wednesday. No fireworks, just the steady grind of deliveries that matched promises. A graph arced. A headline ticked. Somewhere, a handful of analysts updated spreadsheets. Everywhere that mattered, pagers stayed quiet. Evan sent a line that carried weight without theater. Thanks for keeping it clean. Our customers slept. I believed him. Clean wasn't kindness. Clean was the only way through that didn't salt the ground for everyone who had to walk it after us. I visited the river that night, the wind doing the same sharp work it did the day I walked out with a cardboard box. Chicago hummed in steel and steam. I opened my notebook to the page with the starred sentence, follow up on IP Council response, and added one last checkmark that felt like setting a stone where a path tries to wash away. What did I win? Not revenge. Not headlines. Not even the promotion I'd technically gotten months earlier. I won authorship that doesn't need defending. I won the right to breathe without explaining why my name is where it belongs. In the end, that's all the record ever wanted from me. To be patient, to be exact, to be boring in the exact places drama loves to live. I can live with that. I can build with that. I kept my name, and sleep finally kept me.